Hello, my name's Kevin, and I'm doing a video called The Ukraine for Dummies. The Ukraine for Dummies. And I'm doing it because I see a lot of misinformation or half-truths spreading across the media from CNN to Fox News. And I think some of you are being bamboozled. All right, so the Ukraine and Russia, they have a long history. Actually, the Russian Empire started in Kiev. Fun fact, right? You probably didn't know that. But we don't have to go back that far. Let's go into the time machine and return to the year 2010. There was an election in the Ukraine, and a guy from the Donbass won. His name was Viktor Yanukovych. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Viktor Yanukovych. Probably not many of you. Well, that's fine. But he was from the Donbass region, which is the Russian-speaking region, one of the Russian-speaking regions of the Ukraine at the time. And it was a fair election. I mean, nobody complained about it. And everything was going along in typical Ukrainian fashion, corruption and dirty dealings and people getting rich, and most of the very few getting rich and everyone else being poor. And what happened was, if a certain segment of the population wanted to have better relations with Western powers, i.e. NATO. So of course, Yanukovych wasn't for this. He wanted to remain more loyal to Russia, I guess. And there was a coup, right, in 2014. A coup that was supported by America. The president at the time was Obama. Anyway, there was a deep state actor named Victoria Nuland. And she had her hands all over this. In fact, in 2014, she was handing out cookies and refreshments to the rebels. All right? And a lot of people will say this. They'll say, deep state. What's the deep state? The deep state doesn't exist. Well, Victoria Nuland is the perfect microcosm of the deep state. She's an unelected official, an unelected bureaucrat who has way too much power. No one casted a vote for Victoria Nuland. And she's still in the Biden administration. In fact, the one president who fired her was Donald Trump. And he ended up getting impeached, right? So, the deep state does exist. I mean, it comes in the form of unelected bureaucrats who set policy, even though no one's given them the green light. Victoria Nuland was actually on the news recently because, we blew up Nord Stream 2. And she was touting it, saying, oh, what a great thing that Nord Stream 2 is just a hunk of metal on the bottom of the sea. That's Victoria Nuland. And that's the deep state. So anyway, Putin retaliated in 2014 and took Crimea. And that's his, that's probably his crowning achievement. Now he has the Crimea. So what happened was the Ukraine continued to make gestures towards NATO, and Putin didn't like it. And a lot of people sit there and say, well, listen, Ukraine has a right to join NATO, right? I'm telling you, they don't have a right to join NATO. They don't have any right to join NATO. Not if it's going to put the whole world in jeopardy. And something similar happened to America in the 60s, right? You guys remember what happened? The Soviet Union, under Khrushchev, tried to bring missiles into Cuba. And John Kennedy said no. And nuclear war almost happened. So Russia doesn't want NATO on its borders, and we don't want nuclear weapons on our borders. It seems pretty straightforward to me. And the question is it worth it? Is it worth supporting a corrupt regime so that NATO can sidle up next to Russia? And then I think no. That brings us to the next question. Why is the West in such an uproar over Putin? I mean, what's the real story? And I think it has something to do with globalization. Putin carries himself these days as some great Christian leader. You know, he's a big-time Russian Orthodox guy. And he's not into, for instance, the Green Movement, which is a secular religion, in my opinion. You know, he's not into the Green Movement. And he's not into the LGBTQ stuff, right? And he's not into globalization. He's a nationalist. So this rubs world leaders the wrong way. And he's not the only one. I mean, there's a couple others. The one who pops to mind is Viktor Orban in Hungary. Nobody likes him either, all right? Now, I'm not saying that Putin's a great Christian. I don't think he is. I think he's got a lot of blood on his hands. That's how he sees himself. And that's how Russia, in a sense, is defined, right? There's not a lot of, you know, for instance, the Green Movement wants to do away with oil. What's Russia going to do without oil? They're out of luck. That's their main export. Right? So this is an effort to get him out, in other words. And the thing is this can lead to mission creep. Right now they're sitting there and saying, look, don't worry. We're not going to send American troops to the Ukraine. It's not going to happen. We're just going to keep sending them all this equipment. And the question is, who's training them? Who's training the Ukrainians on this equipment? It's Americans. Mission creep is when you state one objective, but then it goes, you know, it doesn't stop there. It keeps going, like in Vietnam. When Vietnam first happened, we were told, hey, we're just sending advisors. And that's not how it worked, right? We eventually escalated the war. And, you know, we're just getting out of Afghanistan. It was a big time humiliation. I mean, what, we want to get humiliated again? It makes no sense. And here's the sad part. We all know how this war is going to end. Right? Putin will keep Donbass and Crimea. And the corrupt Zelensky and his cronies will control the rest of the Ukraine. And all these people will have died for nothing. And it's not worth it. It'll just be lots of dead Ukrainians. Hopefully no dead Americans. Lots of dead Russians. For what? To maintain to maintain the status quo. And I think, you know, you have to ask yourself, is Ukraine worth it? And it's not. People will say, this is about democracy. We're fighting for democracy. Well, the Ukraine's not a democracy. You know, Zelensky's a thug. He's a corrupt little thug. He shut down the Russian newspapers. You know, you might say, well, it's Russian. Well, no. 35% are Russian speakers. So you're shutting down their newspapers. They shut down the Russian Orthodox Church. They shut down Russian television. So how is that a democracy? That's not a democracy. And then this little thug Zelensky stands in front of Congress in his sweatsuit, looking like Tony Soprano, demanding more money. How dare you? Yeah, that's crazy. I don't want to give this guy a dime. Anyway, I'm on 10 minutes, but I will say this. This is how I'm going to close it. If you're wearing one of those blue and yellow pins, it could lead to the death of Americans in the future. And I say this. Leave it to Europe. All right? Leave the European problems to Europe. We don't have to put our finger in every pie. We got our own problems. Anyway, with that, I'm saying goodbye. This has been the Ukraine for Dummies. I hope you enjoyed it. You probably didn't even watch it, but if you did, thank you. Bye-bye.